Greetings everyone, and on today's show we're going to look into potentially something I'm very interested in and I think has a world of possibilities in the world of what if when it comes to James Bond. But simply put, it's this. What if Henry Cavill was cast as James Bond back in 2005 instead of Daniel Craig? And we're going to look into a whole slew and a whole cobweb of what if here right now. Let me just start off and say this. If you are new to the channel, hello by the way, but I am a massive Henry Cavill fan. Now, I'm not going to say I've known him since like the Tudors or something. I came to the attention of Henry Cavill properly from 2013's Man of Steel. In my opinion, he is the best Superman of all time. There's no doubt about that in my opinion. And ever since I saw him in that, I thought he was a really good actor. But it was the 2015 film, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., like so many others, thought, yeah, this man could be and should be James Bond. He would be absolutely fantastic. And it was years later I discovered actually that back in 2005 that Henry Cavill was actually the runner-up to Daniel Craig. If Daniel Craig hadn't taken the role, I think we would have had Henry Cavill as James Bond in Casino Royale. And I think that's just absolutely fascinating, and the possibilities for me are just oozing with that what if scenario. I really want to look into how the films would have been different with Henry Cavill as James Bond. I want to look at the things we would have missed out on if Henry Cavill was cast as James Bond. I want to know maybe how No Time to Die could have been potentially different, and would we be getting future James Bond films in our universe right now if Henry Cavill was James Bond. And there's so much more I want to discuss. But before we get into it, everyone, can I ask already, if you haven't, do give us a like, comment and subscribe to the channel. And if you are listening potentially this to the now new podcast version of this show, which is the Bond Geek podcast, may I say I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're listening and enjoying this on your commutes, on your car journeys, at the gym and whatnot. And sit back, relax as we dive now straight into the concept of what if Henry Cavill was cast as James Bond back in 2005. In an alternate reality where the casting decisions took a different turn back in 2005, the Bond franchise is at a critical juncture. Daniel Craig, despite skepticism over his blonde hair and rugged looks, has just been announced as the new James Bond. However, behind the scenes negotiations have hit a snag. So what I'm imagining right now is they have announced, as I say, Daniel Craig as James Bond, and potentially they're still ironing out a few things, but they feel confident they can announce it. But basically negotiations have fallen apart, and maybe this has something to do with the amount of creative control Daniel Craig wanted, because let's be fair, we all know that Daniel Craig really wanted a massive creative input into his tenure as Bond, and it's something, despite him being nowhere near my favourite James Bond, I am mahootively respectful of him. The fact that he really gave his heart and soul and really tried to go for like these amazing talents and bring them into the Bond franchise, that to me gives a lot of potential kudos in my books. But let's just imagine right now that they've announced the press release, but now they've said negotiations have fallen apart and Daniel Craig will not be James Bond. I can imagine at the time people will be thinking, that's a bit of relief, that could have been a potential disaster, not knowing actually the greatness of what Daniel Craig would become as James Bond, let's be fair. But anyhow, what they announced in a more of a low-key way, that they're going actually now with a some 20-year-old younger actor for the role, Henry Cavill. So let's just fast forward a little bit. It is now past filming Casino Royale. It is now November 2006 and Casino Royale is just about to come out. So how would potentially the audience have reacted to the first in the now Henry Cavill era of James Bond films, Casino Royale? So for me, I think Casino Royale 2006 with Henry Cavill stepping in the kind of role will be nothing short of absolute brilliance. He will carry and blend the severity of brute strength, capturing the essence of James Bond while fusing it with his own iconic charm. The film will be a critical and commercial success, silencing any doubters, cementing Henry Cavill as the definitive James Bond for a new generation. Yeah, so absolutely no surprise, I think, with a lot of you maybe potentially watching this. I think Casino Royale would still have been a massive success, despite it having Daniel Craig or not. Now, for me personally, would I maybe enjoyed it more with Henry Cavill than Daniel Craig? I'm going to be absolutely honest here, 100% yes. I think potentially, like they did with Lazenby back in '69, a younger James Bond would be okay focusing around. And I think Henry Cavill has the ability of looking a lot older than he actually is. And now he's got the ability, I think, the opposite of looking younger than he actually is. But I think people would have very much gravitated to him a lot more than maybe, say, Daniel Craig. I think that's because Henry Cavill is still in that sort of mould of what you expect James Bond to look like. People are a bit more, when he announced, more welcoming of it, and I think more open to it. And I think potentially Casino Royale would have done probably as, well, really actually I think just about the same as the actual Casino Royale we did get received. I think it would have been a massive success. The script would have been amazing, lauded and praised. I still think we get Mads Mikkelsen and Vesper Lind in that film. I think it would have been absolutely success. But now we need to go on to the other films in the tenure that would have been Daniel Craig's tenure, which is specifically Quantum, Skyfall, Spectre, and No Time to Die. The subsequent films in the series I think will continue to push boundaries. Quantum of Solace is obviously next, and will delve deeper into Bond's emotional turmoil, showcasing truly Henry Cavill's range as an actor. Skyfall is obviously next, and becomes still the cultural phenomenon. With Cavill facing off against enigmatic villain played by Javier Bardem, the film not only becomes the highest grossing Bond film, but also earns the critical acclaim, winning several Academy Awards. And I'm going to say this right now, agree with me, disagree with me if you want, but Henry Cavill, in my opinion, being in Quantum of Solace and Spectre, for me personally, would improve it. What I weirdly enough imagine seeing, and again, all speculative here, is actually a much more sort of general audiences starting to, if you will, own and discover Henry Cavill through these Bond films a lot more than what we do have in our own timeline. I can imagine sort of people wanting to sort of cheer him on and following and like want to see more of Henry Cavill a lot more than, say, what we had with Daniel Craig, because we all sort of discover him at the same time to a degree, and we want to see him progress and evolve, and we want to follow this Bond more, and I think have much more of an emotional connection to him. But hey, that's Quantum of Solace and Skyfall. We need to now look at the next films in this potential Cavill tenure. 3 years pass after Skyfall, and Cavill's Bond evolves with the changing times. Spectre is next, exploring Bond's past, delving into his relationships and motivations. Throughout it all though, Cavill's portrayal remains a consistent blend of classic elements of the character with a contemporary edge. And that right there is, I think, the secret of what Henry Cavill's Bond will be. It will be, if you will, that perfect blend of the modern day with the classical elements of James Bond. I really do firmly believe that. I think Henry Cavill's Bond would surpass Timothy Dalton as the most closest to Ian Fleming's original creation. Yes, updated with the modern times. That's expected. But if you look at the potential films of Casino Royale, Quantum, Skyfall and Spectre, and imagine that style of the modern Bond mixed very strongly with the classical elements flooded in and really celebrated at the same time, I think you would have had younger audiences happy, you would have had just general audiences happy, you would have had classical audiences happy, you would have had us Bond geeks obsessively happy, because it's just bringing everything into one performance. But now we need to go on to, I think, the most interesting now fork in the road, if you will, of the potential Cavill era, which will be, of course, No Time to Die. By 2020, Henry Cavill's tenure as Bond has spanned 14 years and 5 films, making the longest serving actor in the role. However, rumours will now start beginning to swirl about his departure, fans clamouring one final outing and for Cavill's Bond to go out in style. In 2022, No Time to Die will hit theatres, marking Cavill's swan song potentially as James Bond. The film will be a celebration of everything that made his tenure special, combining the heart-stopping action with emotional depth. At the credits roll, audiences around the world will bid farewell to Cavill's Bond, grateful for the impact he has had on the franchise. But would that potentially be the last one? I can't help but thinking, is there a strong possibility, hear me out here, that yes, this will be the 5th film for Henry Cavill, but he's young when he started, and we all know, just because from our own timeline, Cavill has a real special place for James Bond. It's not something I think he would just want to give up. I think this is something he would want to play as for as long as he can. And heck, we're still even talking about the potential of Henry Cavill at the time of the recording of this video, still doing it now. So let's just ask a little question here before we move on to other parts of this what if. What if Henry Cavill's last film wasn't No Time to Die? How would that change the film? obviously the big change would be, number one, he doesn't die in the end. But let's dive into this a little bit more. So let's just say, for the benefit of argument here, here's another alternative what if for No Time to Die. Let's say Safin kills Madeleine Swan and Bond's daughter. Bond gets angry, kills Safin, saves the day, destroys the virus once and for all, but it is at a true cost, and it ends a bit like Skyfall, and going back to MI6 as the only thing he's got left, ready to carry on to another day. How many more Bond films could we get with Henry Cavill as James Bond? Well, I'm going to be honest here, I think potentially 2 more. I think, like Roger Moore and Sean Connery, Henry Cavill might have it in him to do 2 more Bond films, taking his number up to 7, like those 2 previous actors, and maybe ending on a much more joyful high note in his Bond tenure than what No Time to Die eventually would be. But again, it's all speculative, we don't know 100%, so take from that what you will. But that's only like one part of this what if. There's another part now I really want to look at, which is essentially, if Cavill was James Bond, what roles would he have missed out him playing that we have enjoyed to this day? So let's look into this right now. Now, number one, obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we have not had, in my opinion, the greatest Superman ever to go on the screen, which is Henry Cavill's Superman. Now, I love Henry Cavill's Superman. I think he gave the character emotional depth, turned him into a 3-dimensional character, along with Zack Snyder directing and Christopher Nolan producing. And we have missed out, in my opinion, on that great performance in Man of Steel, his performance in Batman vs Superman, his performance in both versions of Justice League. He was so criminally underused, and I think it's fair to say, if Cavill ended up being Bond, yes, we would have not had, in my opinion, the greatest Superman ever. But it's not just that as well. We wouldn't have had him in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. as well. We probably wouldn't have him in films coming out like the Ministry of Gentleman Warfare that's coming out soon. He wouldn't be doing probably his Warhammer TV show that's about to come up, or the Highlander reboot. And I think the other one I think all of us are screaming at he wouldn't have been in as well is Geralt, The Witcher. The Witcher for me has been one of my favourite TV shows of recent years. I adored the first season, I really loved the second season. Third season, to be fair, was a bit of a letdown, but Henry Cavill was absolutely amazing in it. And again, it would have been one of those roles we would have never have gotten, potentially. Henry Cavill was just brilliant as Geralt of Rivia. He just loved the character, and he brought it to life in such a spectacular way. It was absolutely incredible, and again, we would have missed out on that. So, upon reflection, is it annoying that Cavill didn't get cast as James Bond? Well, again, we would have missed out on the Superman, Man from U.N.C.L.E., we would have missed out on Geralt of Rivia, so these are some great characters we now have with Henry Cavill, but I'm going to be honest here right now, I would have loved him to have been James Bond back in 2005 and still be playing James Bond now. So overall, really in this conclusion, if we had Henry Cavill back in 2005 for James Bond instead of Daniel Craig, I think the series would have been a bit better. Not saying anything against Daniel Craig, it's just I prefer Henry Cavill James Bond, and I think the films would have been just as good, if not maybe in some places potentially better, because it is Henry Cavill. But I can't deny we would have lost some amazing roles that he has done in the subsequent years after not being cast as James Bond, and still continues to do so. But as I say, we don't know if he's ever going to be ruled out fully yet as James Bond. At the time of this recording, it could end up being truly Henry Cavill as James Bond. We might still get Henry Cavill James Bond films. But I want to know, everyone, what do you think about this entire what if? Do you think I've been over exaggerating the success? Do you think I've been underplaying it? Do you want Henry Cavill as James Bond or not? I want to know. Comment down below and tell me your thoughts and feelings about this. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. But until then, everyone, my name's Henry Stevens and I'm the Bond Geek. Goodbye.